Welcome to the Physician Sense Podcast, a podcast designed specifically for physicians, offering a breakdown of complex financial topics to help you develop your financial IQ, further your financial journey, and improve your well-being. Whether you're a medical student, resident, fellow, or attending physician, you're sure to learn something new that will benefit your journey. And now, your hosts, Chad Chubb and Tyler Olson.
Welcome to the Physician Sense Podcast. Chad and I are excited to keep talking to you early career physicians, particularly those of you who are just starting your new attending jobs. Last time we talked about paying off credit card debt, building up an emergency fund, and most importantly, taking a vacation. And now we're going to be talking about three more subtopics. One is risk management, which is insurance, managing risks that you can't control with insurance. And then secondly, estate planning. And then third, investing. And we're just going to lightly talk about insurance and estate planning because those deserve more space on their own. We're going to talk about those in future episodes. And then we're going to spend more time talking about investing. It's good to see you, Chad. How are you doing today?
Good to see you, my friend. I was going to lead in with a line saying, vacation's over. We're now talking about the real stuff. Thought that'd be a good one-liner to start us off with here. But as always, great to see you. Fun topic. Excited to dig into this one. You know, as you noted there, one of our goals for Tyler and I is to bring on, while we consider ourselves to be pretty big nerds, there are others in certain areas that are even larger nerds than Tyler and I. And some of these topics where I think it's always good to get how we think of it as a financial planner, actually bringing in the expert. Disability term life insurance is a great one because Tyler and I don't sell anything. So we have our own pros that we go to. So we're going to plan a bigger episode around there. But let's at least start with things you should be thinking about. And while we'll give you all the details for disability insurance and term life insurance, we won't walk through like, hey, you may have just missed your chance for a GSI. Here's why this rider is important. Here's this number. We're not going to get into that level of detail. Now, if you have certain questions, drop them on the website, drop them in the social media, and we will cover those. But we would also build specific episodes around risk management because this is such an important topic. So please don't take our quick overview as, oh, it didn't seem that important. This is extremely important. Tyler and I will often say disability is probably the most important topic for young physicians. So out of the gate here, Tyler, post-training income, newest attending physician, you're sitting down in front of him or her. What are the questions that you're thinking through or big ticket items they should be thinking about in terms of risk management, which again is just a fancy term for, in our side of it, disability insurance, term life insurance?
I ask them, do you have car insurance? I mean, obviously most people do, but do you have car insurance and what's the company? If you're renting, do you have renter's insurance or homeowner's insurance if you own a home? I just go one after the other. Do you have disability insurance? Do you have life insurance? And the answers are going to be nuanced because perhaps you'll have some through your employer. Like a lot of employers offer like a base amount of life insurance that's just included in your contract. And then a lot of institutions that physicians work for also offer group disability insurance. And so the answer in this case is a mix of yes and no. Because a lot of people, they have those group policies, but they don't have their own policies. And so you have to go through each insurance type one by one. And to be clear, they are car insurance, homeowner's insurance, disability insurance, life insurance, and umbrella insurance. And so I just go through those one at a time. And then we got to figure out, how to address them. And like the term life and the disability insurance, that's probably the most time intensive conversation, right? Because it's going to be dependent on what their employer offers, what their income is. And also it's very expensive. And so I know a lot of people when they see what the premium is going to be. I know for me, when I get my annual premium, I'm like, oh, I don't like it, but I do like it.
Yeah. That's always a painful one. Disability. And I because especially if you're coming from it from the group side, you're like, I don't even pay for this. It can't be that expensive anywhere else, right? And you're like, oh no. It is. Let me show you. So disability is important, but I always, one of my favorite ways to, and I'm sure you say the same thing, Tyler, I will say not selling products makes this conversation so much easier because there's zero conflict, right? It's that, hey, here's why it's important. We're not going to sell this to you. And I say that because disability insurance, life insurance in particular, and I know we've noted this and we'll note it a million more times, unfortunately, a lot of these are like a gateway drug for financial advisors to get to physicians. And that's why I lead with that comment. I'll even say that during, our presentations to groups. It's like, I'm not that guy or gal. I'm here to tell you why it's important. And that's our goal here today too. But disability, the biggest thing is we would say like, just take your income next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. First year here, you might be 40 years still of rocking and rolling here, depending on when the retirement date would be. Think about how much that is from a dollar perspective. We're talking millions of dollars. Doesn't even matter what your specialty is, millions of dollars. And that's why disability is not only vital, but when you see the premium price tag, it's going to be a couple $100 per month. It's hard to give you an exact number because it depends on male, female, specialty, income, all these moving parts to it. But it's very, very important. And for almost everyone listening, your group plan is likely not enough. One, it's probably being paid for by your employer. So that means it's a taxable benefit. So if you see $20,000, it's likely lower than that. It's going to be one of those ones where you're also going to need a better definition of disability. Most group plans are not a true own OC. If you have just done any type of research on it, that's the main thing you're looking for is a true own OC policy. So those are just some things that we always note early on. I know I want to keep this section high level, and I could nerd out for a long time, as I know you could too, Tyler. But don't think that a group plan is all you need. And then the main reason that is because the definition of disability is likely not the strongest. So that's why almost everyone, and I know we've even said this in our resident and fellow podcast there that we got started with, that's why you should be looking for policies very early on as well. So disability insurance, vital, extremely important, probably one of the very first things you're looking to accomplish if you haven't already done so. And if you did add it on in training, this is probably a good time to check in with your agent because you're likely able to now increase your policy as well because now you have that attending pay, that attending contract. So that's kind of my main topics for DI. What am I missing, Tyler? I'm sure I kind of glanced over some important things that you can add on.
As you're researching what types of policies to get, there is intentional branding and marketing designed for physicians for these policies. One in particular is called a medical occupation definition. That is not the same as a true own occupation policy. So it's not to say that it's bad, because like some disability insurance is better than none at all. But you just want to understand it's worth it. It is so worth it to be able to talk with an agent who is independent of any particular company, who can give you a clear look at what your options are, like this insurance company versus that insurance company, and which one has this definition of medical occupation protection versus true own occupation definition, what the differences are, what the price differences are, and what is best suited for you. So the point of this section is to make sure that you address these types of insurance: disability insurance, term life insurance, umbrella insurance, and of course, your car and homeowners insurance. And adjustments can be made to those to be able to meet what your actual needs are. So as you get into your new attending role, you want to make sure that you are addressing those costs so that you're not just putting you don't want to send all your money to these other directions and then not have insurance coverage. And so this needs to be this destination of some of your paycheck. It needs to be earmarked for these insurance policies. So make sure that you're setting aside the time to address these important, albeit boring, destinations. The next thing, estate planning. Now, this was something that you had brought up. Was there a particular reason?
Well, yes and no. I often joke that our clients have their estate documents done before their parents, and I'm proud of that fact. I will say during COVID, the heat of COVID was the first time that we had two physicians call us in tears saying that, Chad, you told us to get these documents in place for so long. We now have some physicians on our team that are, essentially under intubator at that point, right? They're just trying to make it through, and they'll make a full recovery, but they have to get through that process. And they're like, oh my gosh, like now what do I do? And they're like scrambling last minute to find their state's requirements for a power of attorney, who can make decisions, while they're going through this process. So that was the first time we've ever had that from a physician perspective. Obviously, COVID hit the physician community in a lot different way than, others. So that's, I guess, the personal story add on there. But I always say everyone needs the will, living will, healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney. I don't care what your age is, your net worth. That's the other big one. Everyone's like, I don't need this stuff yet. Or we'll say like a revocable trust. We won't get into those details now, but a revocable trust for how I describe it is just a fancy will. But, oh, I don't need a trust. I don't have any money. No, that's the worst way that you could look at this. Everyone needs this. Even with your negative net worth right now because of student loans, you need the basic 4 at a minimum in place. And, I usually say for our generation, it's probably not the will that we're worried about, right? It's more or less what happens if you have an accident. You're going to make a full recovery, but in that moment, like who's making decisions for you? Who's making your medical decisions? Who's making your financial decisions? That's where those documents are so important. And that's, without kids. With kids, I'll even argue more now because then we get into guardians. So this was just me putting one on there that says, hey, one, from an age perspective, but a career perspective, like we're getting more mature, right? So these are documents that come into play. And how many crazy stories do we see where, Prince doesn't have a basic will, right? So now we're talking people with millions and billions of dollars that are still missing these basic documents. So just taking the time, understanding that they're so vital for so many reasons. That's why I always plug in estate planning there. And it doesn't have to get fancy, right? It's just those 4, the will, the living wills, the POAs. That's what we always plug in early with every financial plan.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important. It's important that we want to emphasize the urgency of this. It doesn't feel urgent because no one thinks that they're going to become incapacitated or that they're going to die. Of course, we don't want to think that that's going to happen. We want to be optimistic. It's also very difficult to imagine a world, especially I think of myself as a parent, for our child to be without us in the world. That's a very hard thing to imagine. But what's harder is imagining that world where we did not make a plan for him. How sad would that be if we had the opportunity and we didn't do it? So put yourself in those shoes. Whether, you're talking about if you're a parent or not, there are consequences to, if we have health events that occur or if we die, those things do affect us and they will affect our loved ones. So it's important to have these difficult conversations and make some decisions. And then you're done with it. Just get it done. And we'll talk more about how you can go about that in a future episode. So that will cost some money, whether you're hiring an attorney or whether you're like using an online resource or something like that. So we can talk about cost, but be anywhere from like $400 to $3,000, I suspect is like a typical range, depending on the level of service that you're looking at. But that is an important destination for your money. Yeah. And now let's talk about investing.
Yeah. Incapacitated was the word that I could not think about through that entire section because I was clearly camera shy. That's the word I was looking for throughout that I could not figure out the exact way to word that. So it goes to show you, even with lots of YouTube and lots of podcasts with you, I still get camera shy. I completely lost that word. So incapacitated is the word we're looking for. Investing. So our goal here today was to spend more time on this topic because believe it or not, episode 6 now, we really haven't touched on this. And I think that makes sense just based on the journey we built out through here. 401ks, 403bs, 457bs, backdoor Roths, taxable brokerage, joint, this, that, alphabet soup to say the least. Where are we starting, Tyler, in your alphabet soup? Where do we start here?
You got to max out the 401k or the 403b, whichever, if you're at a nonprofit hospital system, it's probably a 403b. If it's a private practice, it's probably a 401k. For our purposes, they're essentially the same. The contribution limit is $23,000 per year if you are under the age of 50. And so you can contribute that full amount through your paycheck. And in almost all scenarios, I recommend maxing those out on a pre-tax basis. I say that because a lot of these plans, they offer a Roth option, which is essentially taking the money that you want to put in there, extracting the taxes from your gross paycheck in order to pay the taxes on it and then funnel it into the account. Now, the growth of the Roth will be tax-free, which is great. But as an attending physician, you are likely in a very high income tax bracket. It could vary, but you're at least in the 24% and could be as high as the 37%. And so, and then, add on the state, like, now, if you're in like Florida or another state without state income tax, you don't have that facet. But, if you're in California, 8, 9, 10%. Here in Connecticut, we're like, I think we're around like 6%. And that just gets tacked on. it's really expensive on that top end of your income to have take home pay. So it's a really good idea to take that top $23,000 and put it into your retirement account, because you'd only see like $14,000, $15,000 of it anyway. Most of the rest of it would go to taxes. So put all $23,000 into a pre-tax 401k or 403b. And then I'm adding on maybe a 457b. There's some nuance to that. Before I go on to 457, is there any scenario where you would not do, maxing out pre-tax 403b or 401k?
No.
Right?
Yeah, I think depend on the specialty. If you are in a lower paying specialty, could there be that conversation? Surely, we get in there and we find out there's a lot of debt and there's so it's always possible. But for the bulk of you listening, that should be your first stop, right? I usually will say a good base foundation is we always want to max out that 401k, 403b, and then we're doing at least a backdoor Roth. And then after that, we kind of start to work it backwards. But yeah, 403b, 401k should be slam dunk. For the most part, set it and forget it. We don't see this as often anymore where we're worried about either front loading or back loading. We are big fans of just a nice even contribution throughout the year, almost like a nice form of dollar cost averaging. If for some reason you are a big fan of front loading or back loading, just always keep an eye on something called a true up match. We haven't seen this as often as we once did. I will use one good example though. If you are a physician in the VA, the TSP is a perfect example of they do not have a true up match. So if you max out your TSP early in the year, late in the year, you won't have that benefit of that true up. That's the one very large plan that we still see that today, where most plans you don't. And that just means that the moment you're done maxing out your 23,000 in this example, they will stop doing the matching contribution. So you're just trying to evenly spread that out throughout the year is one thing that we're looking at. But I think for most of us, trying to make it spread out throughout the year is probably your best idea too, and just in terms of dollar cost averaging. So add a little bit more onto that. But yes, 401k, 403b, TSP should be a slam dunk here.
Yeah, I like spreading it out over the course of the year too, just from a cash flow standpoint, because otherwise you've got maybe 3, 4, 5 months where the paycheck is lower and then all of a sudden it's higher. And personally, I don't like that. It's great if things can be the same. Like if, money into the checking account, it's the same every month. It's a good way to just manage expectations and one less detail to think about. Now, if you're part of an institution that offers a deferred compensation plan known as a 457b, there is periodically talk online about how these are plans that maybe you want to avoid. And I'm not saying that they 100% should always be invested in, but I don't think that the concerns about them they're not as big as they might feel. There's two types of 457b plans, non-governmental plans and governmental plans. We're not talking about governmental plans. If you're working for the government and they have a 457b, those are guaranteed. They can be transferred to your future job if you ever leave that job. Governmental 457bs are great across the board, in my opinion. It's the non-governmental ones where you're working for a large nonprofit institution like U of M, for example. If they've got a 457b, should you invest in it? And I say, if it's like a really big institution, probably you should, but you want to look at the distribution options. I had this one doc a few years back. He was trying to figure out what to do because he left one job and was going to another. And he found out that the only distribution option for his 457b was a lump sum distribution, which means in his situation, he had about $300,000 in this account and he had to take it as taxable income in 1 year. So why do we invest in these pre-tax accounts? It's to mitigate or to defer the taxation of that money, right? And so I think in his scenario, I think that he was his effective tax rate was somewhere around 27% or something like that. But that year that he left the job, he made money with his former employer, got the distribution, all 300,000 of it. And then he started the new job. It spiked his income. And so his effective tax rate on the distribution was higher than what he saved on the contribution. And that really stunk. But he just didn't know, and so it's important to look ahead. Before you start the 457b, ask them, what are the distribution options? Many of them offer 5-year, 10-year distribution windows where you can pace it out, or even at age 65. Yeah. I've seen that too. But like if you're part of an institution that has an antiquated 457B plan that only does lump sum distributions, then I say no.
Yeah. And I feel like that's another one where it's been getting more modernized, where it's now like at 65, spread out over 5 or 10 years. So they've gotten better. But yeah, the two biggest risk with a non-government 457B plan are that one, the withdrawal, which is likely the most common one you're going to encounter. Now, can institutions go out of business? They can. And that's where the bankruptcy one could be, where you truly lose all your money. Now, I would say you probably won't, the writing won't be on the wall where they're going to say, hey, we're going bankrupt next week. But if you are terrified that this could happen, one of my jokes is pull all the money out. You're going to get crushed on taxes. But believe me, 60% of your money is a lot better than 100% of your money being gone. So if for some reason you did have that writing on the wall, you could always try to clear it out. But the non-government 457B plans, just do a little bit more research. A government 457B plan, it's pretty much a bonus 403B plan, as Tyler said. There's no other risk there. So make sure you're doing your research on it. My question for you, Tyler, is in our example, we've already said we're maxing out a 401k or 403B. Where do you put the 457B on your list? What bucket is that? Is it right after the 401k or 403B? Is it after the Roth? Is it before an HS? Like, where do you usually, average situation, where do you usually plug it in?
So one of the factors is the household income, because if they're in like the top income tax bracket, we're going to do the 457B right after the 403B, because I just view it as like a bigger 403B. It's like we're going to put $46,000 into this thing. Because if you're in like the 37% tax bracket and we're looking to approximately aim for like 20% of income for retirement savings, we've got a lot of work to do. And it's going to be expensive to not max out both plans if they're available. I mean, you can take, you do the 23 and then start working on the backdoor Roth or a taxable account. That can work, but you are leaving money on the table in terms of like money working for you in your retirement accounts. So I think what ends up happening in a lot of the scenarios that I'm thinking of is we do all of this. We do 403B, 457, backdoor Roth, and taxable account. In terms of like, if I had to like, if there was a choice where it was like, well, I've got enough in our budget for the 403B, but then I have to choose between Roth taxable versus 457B, they're probably not in like the 37% tax bracket.
Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they could be, and then they'd be in a very high cost of living area. That's a whole different subset of issues that has to be addressed. But if that was the case, if they're in a high cost of living area and they're in a high tax bracket, I mean, that would be tough. I think I'd probably do backdoor Roth and taxable if it was, because like at least with those, it gives you more flexibility later on.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I agree. Like most of our clients, we're covering all of them, but there are certain situations it's tough because, right, I would say financial planning software is a very cloudy crystal ball. But if plans are looking very strong, sometimes we'll come in and have a conversation about the 457B plan on, hey, there are certainly tax benefits today, but you're going for early financial independence, or your plan looks really strong, where the taxable account is just going to be a little bit more accessible, and we have those conversations. But for the most part, we're covering all four of those buckets when they're available to us in some way, shape, or form. But it's an interesting one because, yeah, I was, you think through like the buckets or the waterfalls, there's always different ways to describe them. And the 457B is always this one. I'm like, where does it fit in? And again, most of the time it's all covered, but I figured that'd be a good question to ask you while we're on here. So,
and like, I want to add in here because we're talking about tax brackets, just to put it in terms of like income. Just when we say 37% tax bracket, we're talking about people that are making more than $610,000 as a single person, or married. That would be $731,000 or more in household income. So if you're like, you got a 2-physician household, that's not unreasonable at all that you could be in that scenario. But like, say your income is between $200,000 and $400,000 and you're married and you're filing jointly. If you got $400,000 in income and you're married, you're just over into the 32% tax bracket because that's how they work. It's like they're tiered. So anything above $383,000, but less than $487,000 is in the 32% bracket. But just below 383 is 24%. So there's a 8% jump. So if you're at 400 in household income and you could take off 23,000, all of that, or almost all of that, is going to be charged 32%. You knock that down to below 383, you have removed yourself from that next tier of taxation. And so it really makes sense to do the 403B, but now you're in the 24% bracket. So you could have a conversation about, should I be shifting to Roth or taxable? Because the choice of pre-tax versus post-tax is really about how much am I going to pay in tax now versus how much could I possibly pay in taxes in retirement, which is very nebulous because nobody knows what the tax code is going to be 30 years from now. But we just like to say, what could we reasonably expect? And so that's why, Chad and I, we both are like, let's try to do a mix of both because nobody really knows, right? But if you're at like 425 or 430 in household income in this scenario, it makes total sense to do the 403B and the 457B because all of that money, it would otherwise be in the 32% tax bracket, which is a lot of taxes. Get that into your pre-tax 403B and 457B so that you don't have to pay taxes on it. And all $46,000 plus whatever your employer is matching is going to get to work for you. And then you can look at Roth and taxable.
Yeah.
All right, speech over.
Yeah, no. As I always say, if we knew future tax rates, I wouldn't have gray hair in my 30s. But here we are, and I do have gray hair in my 30s. So yeah, that's the hardest part. Is just knowing future tax rates. And you say tax rates over 30 years. I always chuckle because we technically don't know what tax rates will be next year, especially when you have an election year. So, and it changes all the time. So it's one where, I'm sure Tyler would say the same thing. That's why I think one of the bigger value adds today in financial planning has almost transitioned from investment management to tax planning, because investments in a good way, on our topic today, it's become commoditized, and you have these pricing wars now between Vanguard and Fidelity. Today, you can build a good diversified portfolio almost free or a couple basis points. So I think that's been a really good opportunity for our profession to say, all right, if investment management is mostly modern portfolio theory, good diversified portfolio, keep your costs low, control your emotions, where do we add other value? And that's where tax planning comes in. But that's also where the stressors come in, because here we are. I love a good Twitter fight when they're like, no, pre-tax versus Roth. I'm like, no one technically knows. You're technically both wrong, right? We won't know until, we actually get there. So it's just one of those topics where I kind of always chuckle at, but you said it perfect, and you're trying to get this balance. And we'll tell our clients, like, in a perfect world, the day you retire, we have an equal amount of money in pre-tax, an equal amount in Roth, and an equal amount in taxable. It won't happen that way, but that would be a perfect scenario, because then every single year we get to kind of look at the tax code, look at your situation and say, okay, which buckets are best this year? And then you got to redo it again, probably the next year and the next year and the next year, for infinity. So yeah, fun topic, but ever changing.
Yeah, but if you can, as you transition into your new higher income, having all these things in mind in priority of taking a vacation, paying off your high interest debt, building up emergency savings, setting aside funds and having a conversation about all your insurance policies, setting aside time and focus for estate planning, and then these investment account types, your money is going to be spoken for rather quickly. A $200,000 salary is amazing to have. And obviously, like, many physicians make even more than that, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. The money is substantial, but it is going to go somewhere. And you want to make sure that you're addressing these important things first, so that you're being smart about how to support your future self, how to support your future self while also supporting your now self. That's why we want to talk about this. It's super important.
Yeah. And just to kind of add one note to end on here too, I think telling your money where to go, that top-down budgeting is perfect here. I know we kind of noted on part 1 in our last episode, where this is your chance to say, hey, I'm going to max out my 403B. I'm going to max out my backdoor Roth. I'm going to hit the 457B. I'm going to get some of the taxable account, because you have all this new money coming in. So now is one of the easiest times. I'm going to label it actually as the easiest time for you to tell that money where to go, because it's all new. You're in this unique spot, really, besides professional athletes, attorneys, and some other professions, where your income can go from $60,000 to a multiple of that And for the most part, you probably have the same budget, at least for a few months, maybe a year or two in there. So take advantage of that time. Tell the money where to go. Any closing parts on investing here, Tyler?
I think one thing about investing that many people in medicine haven't had the opportunity to learn is like what investing is. And we don't have, we're not going to delve into like the fundamentals of what investing is right now, but it essentially is optimism toward the future. And so it can be scary. You might see things on the news about investing that make you hesitant to invest in your employer's plans or a Roth IRA. There's good reason to, while managing that fear, acknowledging it, feeling it, making the space for it, also understanding why it's important. So take the time to learn about what investing is and try to manage that fear. Because if you sit on the sidelines, you will regret it. So take the time to be optimistic about what investing could do for you and for your loved ones. Because you don't want to be working as hard as you are now, physically and mentally, forever. And investing can help with that. So yeah, just make sure that you're doing that. And then we're going to delve into more of these topics deeply as the weeks and months go on, because there's a lot to talk about in each of these subtopics that we discussed today. And we'll have a lot more to share with you. So it was good to talk with you, Chad.
I'll see you on the next one, Tyler.
All right.
Okay, see ya.
This information is for general purposes only. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific professional, financial, or tax advice, as individual concerns vary. Please see a financial professional, CPA, and/or an attorney in regards to your own individual situation. Wealth Heals Advisory Services and Financial Planning offered through Vicus Capital Inc., a federally registered investment advisor. Olson Consulting LLC, offering advisory services and financial planning, is a state-registered investment advisor.